So I'm so excited to introduce to you Harry Moseley, Global Chief Information Officer of Zoom Video Communications. Harry is a current global CIO of Zoom, and he has been inducted into CIOs Magazine's Hall of Fame, recognized as one of the top 100 CIOs by Computerworld, and honored by Irish Magazine as one of its annual Wall Street 50. Everyone, please help me welcome Harry Moseley. And of course, in Zoom fashion, we're taking this call through Zoom.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Alicia, it's delightful to be here with you this morning, and thank you for the privilege of joining your organization and this wonderful event this morning. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
So just, I'd like to make some comments, and then we'll go into the Q&A. Is that good?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about a variety of topics, and and one of those topics is the different generations that we're encountering all the time. So you got millennials, we've got Gen Z, you've got baby boomers, and you've got seniors. And so let's just start with some of this. So 2/3 of the world's population today is made up of millennials and Gen Z, and these are young adults who have redefined certain terms, as I say it. So one is chat. So I don't know about everybody else, but when I grew up as a kid in Dublin, Ireland, when I had a chat, I would pick up a device off of a table somewhere in my home, which had a wire coming out of the back connected to a brick that had another wire going out of the back into a wall. And I would have a chat with one of my friends. Chat today, completely redefined. Chat is picking up a mobile device and typing some content onto that device, adding some images, adding some video to it, adding some emojis to it, and sending it to a variety of people around the planet. That's what chat is. It's a radically different experience. And connecting is also different. So connecting was, and to some degree still is meeting people in person. But connecting now is different for this population of people. Connecting now is when I can see you and hear you. And I always remember having dinner with my younger son in San Luis Obispo, California, uh, probably about 6 or 8 months ago now. And over dinner, I said to him, "When was the last time you had a chat with Sammy?" Sammy's his brother who lives in Zurich, Switzerland. So he goes, "Yesterday." That's good. And then I said to him, "When was the last time you connected with him?" And he scratched his head and said, "About 3 weeks ago." And that is exactly what I just said, because chat, he was texting with him. They do that all the time. But connecting, seeing, and hearing him is not as frequent. And these young adults have also redefined so have different expectations, if you will, in terms of reacting to things. It's, they live in this world of now. It's like, I want to contact you now. I need the approval now. I want to discuss this topic with you now. They've got little patience for the sort of weekly recurring meetings and things of that nature. So they're very much into sort of action-oriented events. And why is all this important? This is important because it speeds up everything. It takes the friction out of their work experience. It speeds up things like innovation. It's a much more agile environment. And this is all about focusing on increasing the top line and reducing the bottom line expenses. A second topic I'd like to talk about is sort of the video being the new communication. Video is the new voice, so to speak. And there was a study done some time back by a professor from the University of LA, Albert Merabian, that talked about the verbal and nonverbal messaging. And he did an analysis of communications, and it boiled down to three things. Boiled down to words, tone, and body language. And I find this very interesting. So words actually only account for 7% of a communication. Tone accounts for 38% of a communication, but body language accounts for 55% of a communication, which I find sort of wow. But it also sort of reminds me of a story many years back earlier in my career. I was working for a financial services firm in New York, and the CEO called me about 6 months after I joined the firm. And so I was a little nervous, a little apprehensive. It's like, oh my God, it's like, I've been here 6 months, the CEO's never called me. And so I pick up the phone and I go, hello. And this was the conversation. So I just wanted to call you and thank you. This was circa 2005. I just wanted to call you and thank you for putting in that high-def video conferencing system. And I said, it's great. He said, it works flawlessly. It's fantastic. And I asked, why was this so important to you? Because this is one of the things that he set as an objective when I first joined the firm. He said, when I'm talking to a partner on the other side of the planet, and I ask a really hard question, I don't want to hear the answer, I want to see the answer. And when you think about that, and as I've done many times since then, it's like when you're asked a hard question, or you ask a hard question, and people look at their shoes, or they look at the ceiling, or they look over here, you're kind of wondering, it's like, well, is the answer written on their shoes? But when people know the answer to the hard question, there is no hesitation. They engage, they look at you, and they answer the question. I think that's sort of super important in everything in life. In terms of, sort of where are we in this coronavirus world that we're now living through and experiencing, and sort of what's changing. And I think there are some things we will get out of this. It's just a matter of time. The sooner, the better. And I feel sorry for all those people, millions of people who have been negatively impacted by it. But I hope is that we can recover quickly from it. And this world has shown a lot of resilience. So I expect that to happen. In the meantime, though, we've had like lots of different experiences over the last, call it 12 weeks, 14 weeks. One of those different experiences is the work from home model, or as my wife refers to it, as the living at work model. Which is, it actually works. It's, the productivity that companies around the world are seeing from people being able to work from home is rather significant. And it's not because they're working longer hours. It's because they don't have that constant interruption that they get in the work environment. They're not exhausted by the commute, etc. And and so there was always a lot of myths about the productivity that will be achieved by people working from home. Those myths have now left. Many organizations are now considering the work from home model as a permanent part of the way they will engage in our futures. And it's also changed a lot of perspectives on what can be done on video and what can't be done on video. I was just reading earlier today about a couple that adopted a baby over the Zoom platform. I think that's fantastic. You can see courts now operating in a video world. You can see people who have been unfortunately incarcerated being able to connect with their families using video. And these are sort of wonderful use cases. But also in the business world, there was an article published by one of the media channels recently that talked about bankers, investment bankers, and how investment bankers had suddenly, discovered the art of video conferencing and how they can actually conduct business over video on a global scale. And the article had some quotes from some bankers saying how they found it to be incredibly efficient. And there was a statement in there which sort of made me smile, which was, I will not fly to London. This was a New York banker. I will not fly to London for that one-day meeting anymore. So you think about the consequences of all this, the productivity, the efficiency, the increase in the work-life balance, being able to be home, to be with the family, to attend parent-teacher conference, and the impact on the carbon footprint. So I think that's wonderful from an impact on and how we'll see things changing. It's very it's very humbling to be at Zoom right now. As you mentioned a moment ago, Alicia, keeping companies operating on a global scale, keeping governments running so that countries can work through this pandemic, and also connecting people on a social basis, whether it's church services, whether it's bar mitzvahs, whether it's a wedding. The Queen had her birthday on Zoom, and you got things like Saturday Night Live on Zoom. I was watching a football game earlier this morning, and I think it was in Denmark, where the stadium was empty. There was no audience, no fans physically in the stadium, but Zoom was around, zooming around the stadium everywhere. It was quite fantastic, and it's extremely humbling, quite honestly, to be a part of this company today and keeping the world going. Last point I'd like to make is to talk about education. Education is fundamental. I often refer to my own education, whilst it's much more in the technical world. I believe that without that great education that I had in elementary school, in secondary school, and in university, and then the ongoing education I received from the many wonderful organizations I had the privilege of working for in my career, I would not be the person I am today. And I think that sort of, again, education is the foundation. And I think education in the financial world is super critical. It's the notion of, when is the right time to start a retirement account? As soon as you can. Because it's kind of like, one of the things that my mother used to say to me, don't worry about the dollars, worry about the pennies. The dollars will take care of themselves. And so it's never too early to start thinking about that retirement. And, I can't take credit for it. All the credit goes to my wife. My kids have retirement accounts, and they started them when they were teenagers. And I think that's terrific. Another thing is, it's sort of understanding that yes, you can get a credit card, and credit is nice to have, but not necessarily something you should use. So it might be actually better to save up and buy that purchase when you have the money, as opposed to borrowing the money and paying the interest, because then you start that very positive cycle of being able to create that great financial future for oneself, one's family, and live a great life. So again, thrilled to be here. Just wanted to make some remarks, and love to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Harry. That was a wonderful message. I do have some questions lined up here from our chat and from our audience.
No hard ones, please. It is a Saturday morning.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
The first question I want to ask is about trust over technology and the internet. Even online banking and online shopping, when it was first launched, many people were still very skeptical about doing that because of their information. So I was just wondering, since World System Builder is obviously part of the financial industry, how do you see any progression in terms of people's confidence of using technology like Zoom or online to be able to help with their finances, as you just mentioned, like their retirement plans or building their investments and financial future?
Yeah, I think that if we go back, sort of 10 years, I think probably about 10 years ago, we started the notion of sort of paying bills electronically. We started buying things electronically. There was a lot of people who were really nervous about the notion of putting a credit card system into an online system so that it was permanently there, so that when you went to the site to buy something, it was easy. I still know people today who are terrified of like having their credit card stored in a system. they were terrified of like buying something. They would do it for the research, then they would go to the local store and buy it. Um, but I think people are starting to get more and more comfortable with it. And again, there's been a sort of significant maturity around things like encryption, security, privacy, a little bit of regulation is in there as well. So I think that the world has changed dramatically. And the other part is going back to what I was talking about before. It's like, sort of the millennials and Gen Z. These people are completely comfortable with all the above.
Right.
They are super comfortable and they will transact anything online. They are quite happy to jump on a video call. They're quite happy with the technology. They're very technically literate and they have much more trust in in these platforms than the sort of older generations, if we will.
Okay, so the future's looking bright for us. I also wanted to ask, I think there's another correlation between Zoom and WSB. Um, Zoom, a lot of people originally before the pandemic was actually they would rather do things face to face, right? So a lot of things that we see happening today, now people are kind of were forced in a situation to use Zoom. And so WSB, we also want to be the pioneer for financial education. And oftentimes we do receive pushback because people say the market's up, or I still have a job, I have my benefits, and we don't want for something to happen like this, although it presents opportunity just like it did for Zoom. But what message or points that you can give to WSB to help people, based on what you've been experiencing at Zoom, so that people can prepare better financially as well?
Yeah. I think, sort of it's, when you don't want to wait till the last minute to get help. It's kind of like, because then it's sort of, it's way too late. You're much better being proactive, being thoughtful, having good relationship, etc., with your financial planner, with your financial advisor, etc., so that everybody's familiar with sort of like all the moving parts. So when things start to quote go adrift, if you will, or sort of start to trend in a direction, in a trajectory that isn't so positive, it's like you don't want to wait until then to start to engage, because you mentioned the word trust. Trust is super important, and trust is developed between people over time, and is developed through through a relationship. And I fundamentally believe that, not just because I work for Zoom, but being able to see the person you're talking to is much more engaging, because you can see the person, hear the person, and you can read that body language, and that makes that connection. Doing it, in a video, as a, doing it in person, yes, it's kind of like you can never replace the in person. But when there isn't enough time in the day, when you've got a young family and you've got to, it's like, isn't this so much easier than having to sort of like get somebody to look after the kids so you can go talk to the financial planner, financial advisor? It's like it's much better to be able to sort of just take the 10 or 15 minutes. You can do on video less time than it would take you to travel to the meeting. So,
Right.
and again, I think that with the changing generations, people are getting more and more comfortable. And yeah.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on the growth. I know before COVID-19, you were at 10 million users on a daily basis, and now you've grown to 200 million users on a
Yeah.
daily basis. Um, WSB hopes we're on the same track. Traditionally, with our conventions, we only have in person about 20,000 people. And today we've been able to register 180,000. So
Wow.
we're following in your footsteps, and we hope we can continue to work together. Um, so that you can give us tips and advice in the future so that we can grow like you as well. So thank you so much for helping WSB as well as the rest of the world continue, our daily routine and keeping us
Alicia,
afloat.
it's again a privilege to be here. Just want to correct, it wasn't users. We were 10 million daily participants in
Oh,
December.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And went to 200 million in March, but we are at 300 million daily participants in April, which was truly fantastic. And again, wonderful to be here on your virtual event, and look forward to sort of participating at some point in the future, perhaps in your physical event when we're allowed to do those things again. One of the observations I've seen from talking to many organizations over the last 3 months, it's hard to say that 3 months, I've been sort of in this office for 3 months, is that it won't just be physical events in the future, it'll be physical and virtual. And so let's see if we can get 180 to 200,000 next time. How's that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, great.
Everyone,
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, please give a big hand to Harry Moseley. And with that, I just want to mention that actually our convention today has been able to be produced by Zoom, and we're using that platform to be able to, bring in all of our speakers and whatnot as well. So they're a huge part of Convention for a Cause.